New Buddha Way Dharma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
A good day, everyone. Good to see you again. Today I'm going to give a talk on something very practical, which is dealing with distracting or intrusive thoughts. So I don't want to give the impression that everything that comes into your head is bad, or even if it is bad, that one can't learn something from it. There's a little bit of wisdom here in what we mean by distracting or intrusive thought is one that is definitely now getting in the way of your meditating, or perhaps getting in the way of your sleeping. And you know when you feel that it is something negative and that it is no longer helping you. But I wouldn't want to give you the impression that everything that comes into your head that is of a negative nature is to be immediately expelled. We wouldn't get very far if we did that. We learn from the negative as well as the positive. But there are times when the negative seems to be getting the upper hand and is not a very pleasant position to be in. I think you all recognize that because it's very human. I think all 8 billion people on the planet have suffered it at some point or other. And it's very much connected, I think, with the times we live in and the divisiveness and the growing authoritarianism and so on. I want to read something very briefly by Nyanaponika Thera, who was, he was actually German. He was ordained and taught in Sri Lanka. And he was the teacher of Bhikkhu Bodhi, who translates the work of the Buddha. He says, history shows us that great and destructive mass delusions have often been kindled by a single individual or a small number of people. It only takes one person with venom, poison, hatred in their hearts, under the right circumstances, or say the wrong circumstances, can bring about horrifying changes in human behavior. Truly horrifying. Worse than anything you would see in the animal kingdom. Therefore, what arises in our mind is of great importance to us as human beings. He goes on to say, self-protection, that is protecting yourself against the influence of such thoughts of hatefulness, etc., through wisdom and knowledge will protect others as well from the pernicious effect of such influences. So I suppose that's a way of saying that what we're doing here today is a form of, you could say it's a form of protest. It's the mind saying, no, I'm not going to go that way. And what I think does count. And that history has shown us that great and destructive mass disillusions have often been kindled by a single individual. You've only got to look at the news today to see dictators popping up. How do they come to power? And how do they get to do? Well, because they have influence, and because we all have influence. So let's start where the goodness starts, and let's start where the badness starts. So for us, let's start then, on a smaller scale. We're talking here about situations of persistent worry, overthinking something. I'm sure we all get this occasionally where we're trying to sleep and some thought keeps coming into the mind and you drive it out and it comes back again. We call that overthinking, even though we know at the time that it's pointless. This is because we could have feelings of hurt about an incident or the way one is treated or what one perceives as bad treatment, suffering or pain, sadness, disappointment, betrayal by someone you thought was a friend, loss of someone you care about, or loss of property. All these things settle in the mind, and they have a way of staying there. And then one is undergoing mental suffering of some sort. So it's good to think about the ways in which one can deal with that, but keeping wisdom in that it's not, that one should learn from what the mind is getting obsessive about and why it is. So when we look at these 10 different ways of letting go that I put together, with a little help from the Buddha, we have to think each one is dealing with a distraction, but at the same time, in dealing with it, you are actually learning of its nature, because you can't move it on unless you understand its nature. Okay, now letting go. This often causes a little bit difficulty for people, because they think of it as an action, whereas actually letting go is a non-action. It's actually letting go of an action or of a mental activity. So we ask ourselves, well, how do I let go of something? Well, there I am holding this pen. Now let go of it. I've released the tension, released the pressure, released the attachment to the pen. Now, if you ask me, yes, but how do you let go? I'm a bit stumped for words, really, because letting go is not attaching, not holding on. But there are some ways that can draw our attention to this business of letting go. Now, very often we will think of letting go, as I say, as a particular kind of action. So let's say we were driving down the motorway and we realize we're going a little bit too fast. Now we're getting sort of locked into driving very fast. And then we become aware of that and we think, I should really slow down. What do? You apply the brakes. So you apply the brakes in order to slow down. But that's not actually how it is with letting go in your mind. Because pressing the brake is doing something. It's counteracting the velocity of the vehicle. Now that doesn't really work very well. It is suggested by the Buddha in one place, but doesn't really work very well on the whole. There are other ways of approaching this. Now we're lucky here, and I was able to draw on a sutta or sutra called the Vitakka Santana Sutta, which translated means the removal of distracting thoughts. Or you could translate it as the removal of intrusive thoughts. So the first 5 I've taken from that, and then I've added a few of my own. The first one is pretty well known, and I've often recommended it myself, and I use it myself. Now, let's just, I'll tell you what it says in the sutta on this business, number 1, which roughly we could call substitution. That is, substituting the negative thought with a positive one. Drive out the negative one. It will work a lot of the time, but not always. Now, what the Buddha says, translated words, when a bad, unskillful thought connected with desire, hatred, delusion, etc., arises in a follower through reflection on an external or internal object, he or she, in order to get rid of that, reflect on a different object, which is connected with wisdom and compassion. Then the evil or unskillful thoughts are eliminated. They disappear. And what he's saying is that they will often disappear, right? Not always, and not without practice. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. By their elimination, the mind stands firm, settles down, becomes unified and concentrated. He compares it, a beautiful metaphor of like an experienced carpenter or carpenter's apprentice striking at pushing out and getting rid of a coarse peg with a fine one. So you've got a piece of wood, you've got a peg stuck in it, it won't come out, you want it to come out so you can work with the wood, right? You get another peg that fits a little bit easier and push that peg out with the new one. There it goes, gone. I've just let go, right? So now you can try this. What it means is bring to your mind a pleasant thought. It could be a pleasant memory of something that happened, or something somebody did for you, or whatever, and try to stay with that positive thought. Now remember, it's only meant to be an instrument. You're not supposed to then lie there, having pleasant thoughts for the next hour either. It's a way of pushing out the negative thought. Also, don't forget that negative thoughts can teach you quite a lot about yourself and the causes of your unhappiness. Because that's where it is. That's where it is. It's in the mind, and it's arising, and you're allowing it to arise. So now you're disallowing it from arising. Okay, so you move from unhappiness to happiness, or at least to contentment, let's say. Right, so that's what we might call substitution, or thought substitution. People who like turning things into courses and giving them names and then charging money for it, will give some fancy psychological names to nearly everything that the Buddha has ever taught. So you'll often see something like thought substitution. The Buddha never used the phrase thought substitution. I told you what it was that he did say. Another way of looking at it, this is just my own invention, I think, is that I'm quite susceptible myself to insect bites. If I get an insect bite, it tends to become inflamed pretty quickly. Now, I know you've got to try and kill any bacteria that are getting in there. Now, you could get septicemia if you're not careful. But one thing you can do, which people often don't think of, is get a piece of ice or something very cold from the fridge. Let's say you have an insect bite here. Put the piece of ice on the insect bite, and gradually it will start to go down. Right? Now, in a way, that's what we're doing with a good thought overcoming a bad thought. The bite and the inflammation and the itching we don't want. The ice comes along. The ice is kind of the good thing. And then we apply that and it'll bring down the inflammation. Well, in mental terms, that's what we're kind of doing with this substitution. Now, another thing I need to say at this stage, that because we live in a sort of quick fix society, we think that once you know this, that it's supposed to work immediately, and if it doesn't, then it just shows you that Buddha's teaching wasn't that good. All of it is training. So you do it once, it might not work very well. So you do it twice, you do it 3 times, you do it 300 times. Gradually, you start seeing that it actually does work because you have mastered the technique. So again, to use a metaphor, it would be rather like learning to play tennis. You've never struck a ball with a tennis racket before. Your first attempt probably be pretty clumsy. You might miss the ball entirely. You might knock it over a hedge into the neighbor's garden. But gradually, you will start getting the knack of it, and you'll be able to hit the ball in the right place so that it reaches its target. Now, it's the same with this. This is why we call this a training. It's very practical. Only we're so used to thinking of outside things that we think we must do something outside, whereas in fact, the mind is also kind of a playground in which one can play, but one could also have nasty thoughts arising on their own. Okay? So one is being trained in this technique of eradicating or letting go of negative thoughts or distracting, intrusive thoughts. Okay, second one is what you might call rejection. You just reject it. And what the sutta says, that he or she should ponder on the disadvantages of unskillful thoughts. Thus, truly, these thoughts of mine are unskillful, blameworthy, and productive of misery, so I am not accepting it. You get what I'm saying? It's a bit like saying, look, the consequences of my continuing it with these thoughts going on are just painful. They could result in my shouting at somebody, being nasty to somebody, or whatever. I'm losing my sleep. None of it is good. All the consequences are bad. You say this to yourself. You see that. You see for yourself the pain of it. So you say, okay, I don't want you. You just go away. Thank you. Goodbye. Now, again, sometimes once you've mastered it, it will work. Sometimes if something like this happens to me, I even snap my fingers. Snap my fingers to say, go away. You're gone. Thank you. Bye. Gone. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But eventually it works. Let's have a look at another quotation for a third technique here, which is to detach attention. And the Buddha says, he or she should, in regard to these arisings, endeavor to be without attention and reflection, like a keen-eyed man shutting his eyes and looking away from some direction in order to avoid seeing that object coming towards you. So this is really saying, I will not pay attention to that. But you see now, this is where the training comes in. You have to be pretty quick to notice that this unpleasant, destructive thing is coming up. It doesn't have to be destructive. It could just be unnecessary or distressing. Right, so you spot, the earlier you can spot it, the better. Because now you can say, right, I'm diverting my attention elsewhere. Could be something outside, could be something inside. It's like this. Let's use another metaphor. Let's say I've been an alcoholic for 20 years. And now I'm trying to get off the alcohol. Is it very wise to go into a pub with your friends? No, it isn't. You do not go into pubs, because that is going to trigger off the whole desire again for alcohol. It's the same with smoking. If you want to give up smoking, don't hang about where people are smoking. Don't even see cigarettes. So you're moving your whole attention away from that into another, maybe neutral area. Now, this is not such a mystery, is it? As you're walking down the street, or as you're walking up and down the stairs at home, you pay attention to some things and you don't pay attention to others. Have you ever thought of the power of not paying attention? You may only have thought of the power of paying attention. The power of here and now, we hear about. What about the power of there and then? What's happened to that? Going to be unbalanced here. You see, it is something we do all the time, to shift our attention from one thing to another. Maybe to something we like and away from something we don't like. Okay, but once you become aware of how you are in fact shifting attention, then you can master it. The moment some distracting thought, or maybe a view of something appears, is the time to say, oh, I know where that's going, and shut it off. Just don't pay attention to it. And monks and nuns have to do this all the time, because of course they may be attracted to certain people. That's okay up to a point, but then there's a time when they say, I've got to shift my attention because my attraction is getting a little bit too personal here, and they will be trained in how to move. Okay, so that's attention. Now, the fourth one, again, the Buddha's words, just as a person finding no reason for walking fast walks slowly, finding no reason for walking slowly stands firm, finding no reason for standing sits down, and finding no reason for sitting down lies down, and so on and so on. This you might call relaxation. We are wound up. We're wound up nearly all the time, especially in the Western world. We're so wound up, it's unbelievable. Sometimes I used to prefer living in West Africa, where people just seem, for the most part, just they could have very hard conditions, but for the most part, inside they were quite relaxed, in the sense that they were going along with things rather than demanding that things be different from what they are. So you're walking very quickly. This is my little example. Okay, you're walking very quickly. You say to yourself, why am I walking so quickly? I will now walk slowly. So you're relaxing the body. Now, what you see, when you start thinking of combining all these little trainings, you'll see that there is a manifest change in the quality of your mind. May not be 100%. We have not got to nirvana yet. But by the way, all these trainings, they're not ends in themselves. They're basically very basic trainings for moving towards a state of nirvana. But we won't go on to that today. All of these trainings, as you're able to do them, will bring you more peace in the world, more peace in relating to other people, more compassion for others and their unhappiness, and so on and so forth. All this will happen over a period of time. So it's a period of time rather than an event. It's a process. Number five, which we might simply call stopping. Now, I feel uncomfortable with this one, but it shows you that if this is a Buddhist thinking, then he doesn't really rule anything out on dogmatic grounds. We could also call this subduing. Now, he says, remarkably, quote, he or she should, with clenched teeth and the tongue pressing on the palate, restrain, subdue, and beat down the bad thought in the good mind, like a strong man holding a weaker man. Now you might think, that doesn't sound like a Buddha, that sounds a little bit to me. But it's not violent, he's not asking you to punch anybody, because the person you're trying to deal with is inside, it's you. Under maybe some exceptional circumstances, you have to be strong. You have to kind of use a kind of force in order to stop something arising. We could talk a lot about that because obviously it is not a preferred way generally to go. But think of people that have extremely bad thoughts. It happens, and there are some people that are inclined to thoughts that are so bad that they could result in murder, and it happens. Now, maybe that's good advice for someone who has such thoughts, but they also need a lot of other advice to go with it, I would suggest. Okay, well, no, there are 5 left. I think what I'll do is probably divide this into 2, because we would need probably another 15 minutes or so to go through the other 5. But I'll go through the other 5 very quickly, and then perhaps we'll continue this discussion, or continue it with a discussion next time. We will be here next Sunday. Right, number 6 is just say no. That is shutting the door on someone, on something arising in the mind. 7, bodily intervention. You know, your body is not just an accessory. And what you do makes a difference to what is going on in the mind. Let's take the example of not being able to sleep. Okay. If I get into such a state, which doesn't happen so often now as it used to, get up. It might be 3 o'clock in the morning, but get up, go to the fridge, pour yourself a little glass of milk or something, maybe flick through a book or an album or something, and then go back and start again. Lie down by starting all over again. Now, what has happened is that the movement of the body has changed the complexion of the mind. Again, it's worth trying. Okay? Number 8, impermanence. Whatever bad thoughts you may be having, whatever you may be suffering, it will pass, because everything passes. This mood will pass. Say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling really a bit upset about that, but this upset, it will pass. Just because everything else passes. Show me something that doesn't pass. So when you know, well, at some point I'll have a standpoint in the future where I look back on this and I think, what the devil was I thinking about that for? Why was that bothering me? So this too will pass. Number 8. Number 9. Now, I bring this in because a lot of people say to me, I do notice that things are arising in my mind, but usually too late. So I can't do anything about it. Well, that's okay. It's never too late. You can learn from a rather late recognition or acknowledgement of what is arising in your mind. So it's never too late. Soon after the thought has arisen and you have not let it go, then you've caught it. In some cases, it depends on the nature of the particular arising. But sometimes it arises and then it's starting to get a grip on me. And then I say, oh, no, nope, it's getting a grip on me, let it go. So just because I did let it arise doesn't mean I failed. I can still learn from what has arisen. You see what I'm saying? It's never too late. Because often people say to me, yeah, I can do this, but it's always too late. No, 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 no. You can learn from what is too late. It's like somebody learning tennis again. The ball comes across and it bounces off their head, right? Okay, obviously a mistake has been made there. Right. Now, well, is that a total failure? Am I now going to throw a fit like some tennis players do and throw my racket out from the tennis playing place? No. I'm going to say, right, I don't want the ball bouncing off my head. That was obviously a mistake. Must be something wrong with the way I'm holding the racket or whatever. So you can learn from what has happened and not just from what is happening. Or sometimes you can reflect on something from the distant past, thinking, oh, how did I make that mistake then? I would never do that now, because you have learned. So never too late. Finally, this depends on the kind of upset. Sometimes it's because we're upset by, for example, one of the most painful things is someone that you trust lets you down really badly. You thought they were a friend, but actually they're exploiting you. This is very painful. This is one of the things that Shakespeare writes about, you know. It's a real pain. So you can muster up a sense of forgiveness if you look at it as a process which is arising. It arose in this person, and they then did or said the wrong, painful thing. However, they must have gone through some process before that, which might extend back into their childhood or whatever. Anyway, we'll discuss this perhaps next Sunday, because this is connected with something in Buddhism called dependent origination, that everything depends on conditions. And that when you understand the conditions of someone's betrayal or whatever, you think, oh, I see why they did that. Okay, I still don't like it, but now I understand it. And that understanding that will help you. Okay, so to finish, don't expect immediate remedies. This is a training which has different aspects to it. And you can go on doing it, and you're in a sangha. You're with other people that are doing this, so you can share thoughts with those that you are friendly with or will be friendly with. To conclude, I like to conclude with a resounding quotation, don't I? So one from Dogen Zenji. Dogen was a Zen master, the founder of the Soto Zen sect in Japan. And he said, memorably, to study the Buddha's way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget or let go of the self. So once more, to study the Buddha's way is to study the self. To study the self is to let go of the self. Something to think about there. Right, so I will stop. Thank you very much.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.